Thank you for your patience. Love you, baby. Have a great day.
You too.
He's feeling much better. Oh, there he is. Back to normal. He's all back to normal. Khan was sick. He had a kitten cold. Remember I told you guys he was digging in the trash and knocking over the trash can? He was doing that maybe like 10 times a day, and he actually caught a cold, a kitten cold. He didn't want to eat yesterday. Now he's feeling much better. Oh, he's feeling so much better. He was sleeping on my lap all day. He was so hot, but I still had to wrap him in a blanket. I know how he feels with the chills. Feeling much better. Hello guys, sorry about that. So we are finishing up the final part of Nehemiah today, and we'll jump right into it. We're going to start out with this quote to really set the tone and uncover some themes that we were talking about throughout these last few weeks. So we have another by none other than Francis Bacon. New nobility is but an act of power, but ancient nobility is the act of time. And how many times have we discussed here today, or discussed in past days, how God, right, the God we praise, we worship, we serve, has really stood the test of time. We talked about the confusion that took place with the Ammonite and the Moabite people, those who have many gods that they were worshiping, God, and how their names at that time were known. Okay, these people were not making things up, right? It had to come from somewhere, whether it be one of those beings that we talked about, whether they be extraterrestrials, whether they be fallen angels, whether they be jinn, whether they be spirit, right? I love you. Kiss Cam. Whether they be one of those four beings. These Ammonites and these Moabites did not make it up. Or maybe they were really worshiping God himself, right? Just confused, right? And created this idol and maybe mixed it with another experience that somebody had with one of those four beings. But we said there, in this quote, just to touch on it once more, new nobility is but the act of power. So there must have been at that time for these gods to arise, false gods we can call them, but for these idols and these gods to arise, it was an act of power. It was something that somebody experienced, somebody recorded, somebody told a story, and somebody had the information from one of these events to go ahead and pass on. But these names, as we'll discuss here, we're talking a little bit about the Ammonites and the Moabites once again, because we're revisiting that time in Ezra when these people, the Jewish faith, the Jews, right, they were intermarrying, right, they were mixing and doing all of that. We're rediscovering that part, and the Ammonites were worshiping. I have so many tabs open, you guys, because there's just a little bit of things that I want to touch on. Ammonites were descendant of Lot and his daughters. Okay, do you remember Lot? Real quick, side note. Lot were the people. Lot was a good, faithful man. Okay, he was a good and faithful man. They escaped the destruction of the town because there was a lot of power going on, power play, power struggles where men were sleeping with men, even though they had their wives and children at home. It was a power thing. It was a unhealthy lust. Okay, this wasn't out of love. This wasn't as beautiful as we see a lot of our same-sex relations today. So just keep that in mind when you're reading about that in the Bible. It's not that we condemn the lifestyle of love and everybody loves everybody. It's more so the nastiness that was going on, in the sense that it was power, it was revenge that was taking place, it was violence that was taking place, man upon man, that was mixed with lust. Anyways, we remember Lot. okay? And his daughters were actually the ones to sleep with Lot after they escaped and hid in the cave. They wanted to carry out their family line. So his daughters wanted to sleep with them so they could have children and carry out the family line. A bit self-serving, I would say, and this was before there were any rules to say, no, that's not okay, so it's not really any blame on them. But just pause for a second, but that's where the Ammonites and the Moabites come from. All right, and the Ammonites' primary deity is listed here as Milcom. I'm not going to get into Milcom too much because I tried and I couldn't find much as like what he represented or what the entity represented. There wasn't actually a lot of information, and that just goes to show you, right, that even though there was a powerful event, several powerful events, and somebody along the way had an experience, a powerful experience that led to the worship of this deity Milcom, who knows what Milcom is today, right? Has it stood the test of time? Has it been mixed in just with like, oh yeah, Milcom was probably just a version of our God that we worship, El? And that's honestly what a lot of it comes to be, because as we mentioned, God permits certain things to take place. He permits any extraterrestrial, any magnificent thing to come and move about the earth under his guise, okay? He has the full control and the full authority. He permits jinns to do certain actions, although these jinns or demons, as you would say, aren't necessarily under the thumb of God and they can kind of do as they wish. God has the final say, as always and forever. I'll send it to you. I was going to do white rice with barbecue sausage like I kind of did, just a little different style. That's
for dinner?
Or I can make spaghetti if you want, but...
Can you make me spaghetti for lunch?
Yes, I'll make you spaghetti for lunch.
Thank you.
Yeah. God permits these spirits and these fallen angels, right? He allows them power and he allows them to make certain impacts. So nothing is outside of God's guise, out of his thumb, out of his rule. The demons are right there, another story. The jinn are another story. They have a little bit more free roam, which is why they cause the most trouble. But we're not condemning and we're not harshing anything. But when it comes to a people, right, God's people that he created, right, that he created and he allowed to flourish, he does get a little bit offended, all right, or we should say a bit offended when the worship becomes confused and they really do disregard him in more ways than one, and they do things that are gross and nasty and, you know, sacrifice children and things like that. And the fire, okay, it's much more brutal than anything that we could compare to today. I'm just going to leave it at that, okay? It was a lot more offensive than our modern day, what people call child sacrifice, okay? God has full reign and full control over this stuff, all right? Just trust, right? Trust him. Don't worry about all this nonsense. I know we're talking about it because it comes up again and again. It's important and people tend to get confused from time to time, like myself included. But let's go ahead and see. Ancient nobility is the act of time. So whose name, right, has stood the test of time throughout all these ages and all this time? God, Allah, Yahweh, Yeshua, okay, is Jesus, but Yahweh, okay, Elohim, El, alright, the big guy. And we can go into Hinduism another time. I'm not even going to go there right now, okay, because it's going to open a whole can of worms that I'm not ready for at this time. Alright, but let's go ahead and just jump right in. I swear it's not even a chapter, it's just a few, wallah, it's just a few lines here. So, on that day, the book of Moses was read aloud in the hearing of the people, and there it was found written that no Ammonite or Moabite should ever be admitted into the assembly of God, which is the Israelites, okay? Because they had not met the Israelites with food or water, but had hired Balaam to call a curse down on them. Our God, however, turned the curse into a blessing. So this part, I had to do a little digging. First off, these Ammonite and Moabite people were not hospitable. Remember, we talked about hospitality and how it's important to be hospitable, especially at this point in time, and then as well. Okay, very important. You never know who you're going to meet. You don't judge a book by its cover. You're hospitable regardless. Okay, regardless. I could argue that sometimes you can be a little too hospitable, as we'll read in a few seconds here. But they were just not the type, okay? Very opposite of hospitality. They did not offer food, water, such and such. And this part here, how they hired Balaam to call a curse down on them. So I thought Balaam, when I first read this, was like another idol or something like that. But no, if we remember the narrative of Balak and Balaam, Balak was the king, and he hired this wouldn't say a sorcerer, but maybe like a prophet, I guess. Forget. Balaam, he hired Balaam to go ahead and curse, I guess a sorcerer, curse the Israelites. And he tried, and God would literally tell him no. Like, he heard the voice, no, you are not to curse the Israelites. And Balaam, something came over him, and he went back to Balak and said, I will only do what the Lord says. I cannot do anything. So each time Balak sent him to go curse the Israelites, Balaam was really blessing the Israelites. That's how God turned the curse into a blessing. So that's another reason, right? God has full control. If he does not want something to take place, he will not allow anything to take place. If it's permissible for the time and the setting and the way that things need to work out, he will go ahead and allow it to happen. But he really, again, the final say of all things. So that's, again, another reason besides the Lot incident that Ammonite and Moabites were not supposed to mix with the Israelites. All right, but they did, right? Love is love. This is what happens. Anyways, while all of this was going on, this is Nehemiah, by the way, I was not in Jerusalem, for in the 32nd year of Artaxerxes, king of Babylon, I had returned to the king. Sometime later, I asked his permission and came back to Jerusalem. Here I learned about the evil thing Eliashib had done in providing Tobiah a room in the courts of the house of God. I was greatly displeased and threw all Tobiah's household goods out of the room. This part, when I read it, it cracked me up a little bit, because Nehemiah and Tobiah. Tobiah was that governor that wasn't really a governor. He was just well respected in his family, and he had lots of children, and he was a leader. Okay, but as he was gone, Eliashib, the priest, gave him a room in the house of God. And it does say here, right, the courts of the house of God. So maybe it wasn't in the most crucial parts. It was in the court. So I'm like, kind of what's the big deal? Maybe some jealousy going on. The fact that he was greatly displeased and he threw all of Tobiah's household goods out the room kind of killed me. Just reminded me of so many things. But I'm kind of like, what's the big deal? But it says here, I gave orders to purify the rooms. Then I put back into them the equipment of the house of God, with the grain offerings and the incense. So the fact that it was God's articles were moved to go ahead and house this Tobiah figure, yes, I could see how that is disgraceful. And, think of when you leave, right? You come back and your stuff is all out of order, your place is a mess. What happened? It's extremely offensive, and I could see why Nehemiah got a little upset. A lot upset. The upset continues, though, okay, because he comes back around the same time that Ezra had announced to the people about the book, how these people are not supposed to intermarry. The people in this time were feeling condemned. So they already had their Passover, and they're coming to Jesus moment as spoken. But this is that part where they actually feel the condemnation, because they read the part of, we are marrying the Ammonites and the Moabites, right? The pagans, as they were also called. So they were a bit condemned in this moment. And this part for Nehemiah makes me a little bit upset, because he was upset. We know that Ezra got upset, but he inflicted the sorrow and... Oh, here he goes, back to normal. Hey, Kong, now that you're feeling better, You need not do this because you know what happened last time. Come here. Come here. I thought that would teach him the sickness, but like I said, he's having a little bit of trouble of putting two and two together at this age. I'm not going to say all the time that he doesn't learn what God wills, right? So sorry. Anyways, so we know that Ezra was upset. Okay, he's pulling out. He was pulling his clothes, crying, mourning. He was more of an internal emotional. But this Nehemiah, this governor, was an external emotional. And he actually beat some of these men who had married these foreign women. So I'm going to put foreign here because personally I do not like the way that the term is blanketed and the term is used. I think they could have used many other words besides the ones that are listed in all versions of the Bible. Okay, so a lot of the versions use the word foreign, but the KJV, King James Version, and the New King James Version, New King James Version uses the word pagan. It's a little bit more understandable, and it does not blanket and does not bring in the associations with race or being outside of the race, even though literally it makes sense because they were outside of the race. But trying to apply this to today I think it's caused a lot of problems. I will just leave it at that. It's caused a lot of problems with the segregations and the way that we box ourselves outside of mixing, okay? I think it's caused a lot of issues. So I'm not going to use the word foreign like it's stated, okay? I'm going to use the word pagan, and even I do like the word strange, okay? They can just put strange like they did in the King James Bible version. Strange is okay, all right. It's not targeting even necessarily the pagans. So anyways, he actually beat the men that were marrying their strange wives. He beat them. He pulled out their hair. He was very cruel, and again, it was more of a externally physical, emotional reaction that he had, and it was not good. And I do not condone, and I'm not pleased with that outcome. When I read that, I'm like, ugh, Nehemiah, I was trying to fight for you and I was trying to be on your side, but as you inflict violence on your fellow people, I can't agree with that, and I'm just going to put it at that. Although I do understand he was angry, I do understand he was heavy, and he had the issue with the house of God and Tobiah out of his own jealousy, right? But there's no excuse to inflict violence on your fellows. So, I'm just going to leave it at that here. I rebuked the nobles of Judah and said to them, "What is this wicked thing you are doing, desecrating the Sabbath day? Must we hear now that you too are all doing this terrible wickedness and are being unfaithful to our God by marrying pagan or strange women? Remember me with favor, my God." So he says this several times throughout the book of Nehemiah. He says, please remember me with favor, because he's really trying to make it seem like he's really trying to impress upon us as readers and upon the Lord in this time as he's writing this, to remember him with favor. Just do it. He's saying he's doing this out of the faith, and he's doing this out of the love for the Lord, which is true. But there are ways that he could have gone about this moment here. Same with Ezra too, I could argue. And I'm not saying that it's permissible, right, to go ahead and let the external world influence your faith and things like that, because it's not, all right? There's just ways that it can be handled and dealt with effectively, okay? All right. So there was also issues, right? People were bringing in goods and kind of doing like an import-export thing on the Sabbath day. Sabbath in this text and in past text being Saturday, okay? Not Sunday, Saturday. So that was an issue. Anyways, and I want us to separate ourselves far from this notion of foreign. Okay, foreigners are not the problem. I feel like when I read that at first, I wanted to make that very clear, because we look at the synonyms for foreign. Okay, we have overseas, distant, remote, far off, external, outside, alien, non-native, adventure. I don't know what that is. Okay, we also have unfamiliar, unknown, unheard, and this is where we get strange. Okay, I feel like strange is fine, bizarre, peculiar, odd. Okay, but still, we don't want to always negatively connotate that, especially when we're talking about women. All right, am I right? There's no such thing. But if we use the word pagan, now we can get into a little bit of other synonyms: heathen, infidel, idolatrator, atheist, non-theist, irreligious person, agnostic, skeptic, heretic. Okay, in this, I mean, trying to classify pagan as an atheist, it's not necessarily accurate, because we have here their worship of a god, right? Of an experience that they had experienced, okay, of whatever it may have been that somebody recorded and somebody told and somebody experienced. It's not like it's a lie. All right, so we're putting that in there. It's not that they were atheist or anything like that. They just had an experience that was different from what everybody else was doing. All right, so with that, you can see that there's a lot of heat around this. There's a lot of heat. There's a lot of feuding around this, and I hope that some of this was cleared up. There was so much. I went, if you can tell, I went into like a little bit of a tunnel last night, a little bit of a tab tunnel. I have a few tabs open that kind of supported a lot of my expounded upon ideas and theories. Okay, if you look up, because I was trying to look up, like, who's this Milken guy, where did he come from, where was the inspiration, that type of thing. There's nothing associated with him really. It just gets confused with, like, you see a picture of Molech or Chemosh or whatever, but they are actually, there's a company today called Milcom, which means military communications. All right, it's a legit company. To our veterans, I hope you had a blessed day yesterday. Okay, military communications. And what do we use military communications now? Not always is military defense and bloodshed. Okay, it's also intellect, intellect, understanding the cultural differences. Okay, that's honestly what our military is really adept at. I'm really proud of our members who serve, due to the fact that it provides a lot of intellect for us, a lot of intel of not only other nations and other cultures, but beyond that, right? We're trying to understand, right, this energy that affects us so greatly here on earth. Okay, we're trying to understand, but again, that's Milcom for you. Okay, so I will leave you guys with this. I know we went on a few different tangents here. Nehemiah, I'm trying to be proud of him. I was on his side. I was, rooting for him, coming as a humble servant. But think of the words that I used to describe Nehemiah once again. I used servant to describe him. I used sly to describe him. Okay, he was kind of that kind of character, and he is a little bit angry and aggressive during this time. All right, he just really has a lot of emotion, and he really strives for the comfort of the Lord, and he really strives to do what's right in the eyes of the Lord. But you know how sometimes they can be misconstrued. And again, don't get too hung up on the words. This is what was said at this time, and this was the best that our translation could get us. So I hope you guys are good with that, and I appreciate you for listening. We are done with Nehemiah. All right, God bless you guys. Have a good rest of your day, and I'll talk to you again very soon. Bye-bye.